schools.org. Just sign
Right.
yeah.
Good evening. I would like to call to order the February 14th, 2022 work session of the York County School Board. I hope everyone is having a great Valentine's Day. As we approach the end of February, spring is right around the corner, and most of us can't wait for warmer weather. I would like to once again extend appreciation to our families, students, teachers, and employees for their continued support and dedication as we continue to move forward, with our focus remaining on the best interests of students and staff. Before we proceed with the presentations, I want to express gratitude and honor for our school board clerk, Ms. Sandy Ford, during School Board Clerk Appreciation Week. We presented Ms. Ford with some tokens of our appreciation as a board, but I want to tell you on behalf of all of us, we appreciate all the hard work, your organization, just your kind and gentle demeanor, and just the fact that you're a light to everybody that you come in contact with. So thank you very much. We appreciate it. And before we move on, I just want to give honor to Dr. Shandor for being named the Regional Superintendent of the Year. We're very proud of you, and we'll be cheering you on as you, I don't even know if you compete for the State Superintendent of the Year, if it's a competition or...
Push-ups and sit-ups.
Okay, sure. We'll be cheering you on, so we're very excited for you. So now we're going to move into presentations. First, we have our FY23 budget update. Dr. Chandler, I believe you'll be presenting information on that first topic.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Rawls. And I second the recognitions for the board clerk. Ms. Ford does an amazing job. She keeps me straight and organized, which is a tough task. All right, so thank you, Ms. Geraltz, Mr. Myatt, and school board members. I'm going to let Mr. Bowen pull our presentation up. So before I begin the presentation, I do want to share that there's nowhere I'd rather be on Valentine's Day than with you, presenting our budget. I'm sure you feel the same way. It's my privilege to present my FY23 proposed budget. Before I begin, I want to thank Mr. Bowen for leading the work in this budget cycle with YCSD. I also want to thank our cabinet members, executive leadership team, our principals, school staff, and community members. All these folks participated in the process of providing us information to guide this budget. I want to begin by sharing our process as well as some of the areas that are challenging for us. We utilize the same budget process as in years past. We held virtual community budget sessions. Staff and community members had online opportunities to submit suggestions. All 19 principals were asked to work with their staff and leadership teams to provide input, and each department chair leader submitted budget requests as well. Overall, you can see there were 201 suggestions, and that totaled just over $6.2 million. And the clear priority, other than mandates, was staff compensation. So our primary challenges continue to be driven by the effects of the pandemic, and they are enrollment variables, recruitment, and retention. In 2020, we had more than 12,900 students, and we're projected to reach 13,138 for enrollment in the 2021 school year. While we did experience a significant decline, like school divisions across Virginia and the country, we have begun to see a gradual increase. We did receive hold harmless funding the last 2 school years based on the projected 13,000 plus enrollment, but those funds will not continue for FY23. The budget I am proposing reflects funding based on our projected enrollment of 12,671 for FY23. Looking at recruitment, the school board has supported multiple efforts to combat this problem, but it still remains a challenge for us. Over this school year, Dr. Vladu and Dr. Corbin Staten have shared vacancy information with the board each month. Looking at this slide, you can see where the division currently sits with instructional position vacancies, as well as the highest number of vacancies we've experienced at any given time this school year. So for instance, if you look at the second row for teacher, our highest number of vacancies during the school year was 22, and now we're down to 9.5. And if you look down further, special education paraeducator, we were at 28, the highest number of vacancies during the school year, and 16 currently. I want to commend our HR team and our principals as they've worked very hard to make sure that our schools are staffed. Looking at several other instructional positions, you can see on this chart that hiring remains stagnant here as well. Turning to non-instructional positions, which account for close to half of our staff, you can see custodians and bus drivers continue to be positions we struggle to fill. Though again, our team's extensive recruiting efforts have made some inroads filling bus driver positions. For example, at the Job Jamboree just a week and a half ago, we had 9 applicants come in for interviews for bus drivers, and we offered 8 contracts to those folks. So we're hopeful that they continue to work through that process. While we continue to aggressively recruit, we also need to prioritize supporting our veteran staff. This is another slide that the board has seen before. Dr. Vladu shared that the division has fallen behind in our strategic plan objective to remain in the top 3 school divisions of the Hampton Roads comparator market for the licensed compensation. The shaded cells represent the top 3 on the bachelor's scale. As you look at the second column from the right, YCSD has 0 steps in the top 3 in the comparator market. And if you look at the top row, the starting pay, YCSD is lowest in the region. Now, this is the master scale that Dr. Vladu shared earlier this year. Of the 31 steps on this scale, 1 step is in the top 3, while there were no steps in the top 3 on the bachelor scale. Now let's begin looking at the budget proposal, beginning with anticipated revenue. The state revenue is based on the governor's proposed budget, an increase of 6.1%. This is based on the projected enrollment of 12,671 students, a reduction in the local composite index, and increases for compensation, an increase in sales tax revenue, and the re-benchmarking of education costs. The county administrator has indicated that $1.8 million is our working number for us to build this budget. As you can see, a small change in adjustments for the federal grants at the federal level of $139,000. Federal stimulus, this is shown as a separate line item, as the stimulus funds were provided to the division as one-time funds, and once spent, this revenue will be eliminated. It also is shown as a reduction in school funding from FY22. We always look to identify areas of savings as well. Our staff attrition projection number this year is almost $659,000. In order to align our FTEs with our current projected enrollment, I'm proposing to eliminate 10 teacher positions through existing vacancies or attrition, saving us $700,000, and proposing to eliminate 2 paraeducator positions, saving $60,000. Again, this would be through existing vacancies and attrition. So we add the savings of attrition and positions, our net additional resources is just over $8 million. After collecting and reviewing input and feedback, we continue to bucket these in 3 priority areas as we have the last few years, with a slight change. On the instruction front, addressing unfinished learning is a priority and a requirement tied to the federal funds. Retention and recruitment, as I've shared earlier, is one of our greatest challenges, is also a top priority. And of course, meeting mandates and maintaining safe learning environments. To address areas of unfinished learning, ESSER grant funds are being used to cover costs associated with hiring additional staff and for the various assessment platforms the division uses to inform instruction. Additionally, through the use of ESSER funds, the division is able to provide e-tutoring services and purchase additional instructional tools. The division is also using ESSER funds for increased school-based remediation opportunities and a robust summer academy that will provide both remediation and enrichment academic experiences. One of the board's belief statements in our strategic plan states that recruiting and retaining a high qualified and diverse staff are paramount to the success of our students. Therefore, it's critical that we continue to provide competitive compensation to keep and attract the very best. So you can see on this slide the teacher schedule. What I'm proposing is a 6% average increase with a step of 1.52% plus the COLA, which is the cost of living adjustment at 4.48%. For non-licensed and administrative schedule, it's 5%. Step would be 1.75% and the COLA 3.25%. Paraeducators, 6%, with a step at 1.75 and the COLA being 4.25%. And bus drivers and assistants, 5%, the step at 1.5% and the COLA at 3.5%. I do want to go back and clarify quickly that the teacher schedule includes teachers, our ACIs, media specialists, athletic directors, school counselors, school social workers, NJROTC instructors, and math and reading coaches. I want to make sure I clarified that. Each year, the HR department conducts a review of positions. For FY23, this consists of Group 3. All positions in grades 17 through 27 were reviewed, and I think that's about, Mr. Bowen's, 65 different positions that were reviewed. Adjustments have been made to those positions that qualify under the market review. These adjustments increased costs by $128,900. In addition, due to the significant vacancies we've experienced year after year, we conducted an out-of-cycle market review of the custodian positions. This adjustment increased cost by over $114,000. YCSD still needs to make up increases to the health and dental plan. For calendar year 2023, not the fiscal year, total plan premiums are increasing 15%. The $990,000 represents the employer cost for half of fiscal year. Minimum wage will increase again on January 1st, 2023. Our expected cost will be just over $100,000. New Horizons proposed an increase of $455,000. This is not a final figure. The increase is due to increased enrollment for YCSD students in the governor's school, special education programs, as well as career and tech education programs, as well as their cost increase, which includes increases in salaries and benefits. We are also adding 2 school resource officers at the middle school level. This will give us a total of 8. This has been a priority for the board for several years. In fact, this was proposed in my FY21 budget, but was eliminated as a result of the pandemic. The county has agreed to absorb the cost in their budget, as well as the increase for the grounds maintenance. So to recap, you can see the total funds available along with the expenses for each of the priorities. Total expenditures of close to just over $8 million. As you can see, this proposal, we will have a balanced budget. Our bottom line is more than $169 million, a 3.8% increase from FY22. This budget will enable us to continue moving forward with the work of the school division, especially accomplishing the goals in our strategic plan. Looking at some next steps, we'll have a school board public hearing on February 28th. Then we'll have a work session on March 14th. We should have some additional information after crossover with Mr. Bowen that we can make some adjustments on the 14th. The school board will have the opportunity to adopt the proposed budget on March 28th, and the school board will adopt the operating budget on May 23rd. So again, I want to thank the board for your continued support as we work through the budget process. I also want to thank Mr. Bowen for all of his and his team's work in helping develop this budget. At this time, I'll stop, and if there's any questions or comments.
I have a question about the possibility of the grocery tax being removed and what impact that's going to have on York County and then York County schools. Has there been discussion about that?
There has been discussion about that. I know we're still waiting to receive some information. I know that in my conversations with the county and Mr. Morgan, that if the grocery tax went away, it would cost the county about $3 million. It would certainly have an impact on the school system. Is there anything that you want to add, Mr. Bowen?
What looks like it's been approved is eliminating the grocery tax, but leaving in place the local portion. It looks like that if that passes, that will have no impact on the county side. And so we shouldn't see any negative result in our funding.
I know the state was talking about offsets from other revenue, perhaps in time. Which leads me to my question. This budget is based on the previous administration's budget. How do we look? For instance, I saw, and I don't have it in front of me, I took notes. I believe it's in draft House Bill 535, talking about a 4.5% compensation increase for teachers beginning in 23 all the way through 27, 28. Anyways, Bill, what?
I have not seen that.
Yeah, 535. I'll see if I can dig the notes up, and we'll do a little bit more homework on that. But obviously, that's to stay much longer. But how's it look? I know there's factors with regard to revenue, privatization, and some other pieces in the governor's budget.
The state of the economy in Virginia is still very, very strong. And so there's still a lot of money at the state level to be appropriated. There's still additional federal funds, ARPA funds, to be distributed. And so we were just recently awarded a grant totaling $970,000. So as these grant opportunities come up, we're still applying for them, or we're still receiving them. So we still look for changes to occur, even with the House and the Senate bill, that we will eventually get some more money, and then we'll be able to share that information with you on March 14th.
That's good. So you still remain confident. That's good.
Very, very confident about the outlook.
Good.
I just want to say, with the proposed 6% increase for teachers, I think that's a fantastic, number to look at. I'd even like to see possibly expanding that a little bit, or as in future years as we go on. But I know we were looking at like the comparative markets around, and if other school divisions are looking at doing similar, then we could be in the same conversation next year. And we might need to look at figuring out how we can do, I know we've talked about a big splash, doing something so that we can make up some of that ground, and it's easier to retain than recruit sometimes that we have. So sort of keep that in mind as we move forward with it. But the 6% is a really nice number to start with here.
We agree.
When we're showing our vacancies still, when we're not filling those, are we having people apply and they're not qualified, or are we just not having people apply for those positions? And this might be a question, unfortunately, for.
I'm going to ask Dr. Vladu if he wants that. You want to come up and answer that question? Welcome to the table, Dr.
I just think when the community looks at that, I don't ever want them to think that it's not that we're not out recruiting,
We're not
meeting.
trying, yeah.
I mean, I went to the job jamboree and there were so many people there and the numbers were great, but for a lot of these are specialized, occupational therapists. Well, are we just having nobody apply for those kinds of positions?
So we do have applicants, but the number of applicants is very limited. We're competing. And so if you may have 10 openings for speech language pathologists within 10 miles, and then we may have 5 candidates. So they'll apply, but they're also entertaining multiple offers in the region. So 10 positions, 5 candidates, somebody's not going to end up with.
Okay.
And multiply that against, hundreds of positions that can happen. I know the Job Jamboree, that's a huge event, and we're able to get over 100-some interviews, and many of those candidates are viable candidates, and that's been a go-to. But it's a challenge. Every single position we have to compete, and we have to be at the top of our game.
And for that job jamboree, you're making offers and contracts for this year, but really the focus is at this point for next year too.
We have a limited number at this point of vacancies that we're looking to fill this year, but we have flipped the switch. Right now, we need to look primarily focus on next year to make sure that every single classroom and every single position and that support students is filled.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Tony.
One quick question, Dr. Vladu. So the pipeline's smaller, but real quick, back to the specialist. We got the other instructional positions. I think they're tied to the ESSER funds, where we've been challenged to fill those, speech language paths, student achievement coach, so forth. What are we doing to make ourselves more competitive? Have we taken a hard look at compensation, how do we incentivize those positions to attract?
We have taken a record number of off-cycle compensation reviews. So for instance, same like an employee will come forward to us and say, hey, can you look at my position? At that point, we initiate research and we look at the comparative market and beyond. We are also beginning to look at the private sector for, let's say, a position now we could, as a public entity, it's really tough to compete with the public sector, particularly in the areas of IT and specialized. But in often cases, we do that research. Oftentimes, we find out right where we need to be. When we don't find that out, then we come back and we brought before you a record number of cycle compensation requests or the board meetings that you approve. So that's really the process we use to ensure that we're competitive.
All right. I would like to drill down on these particular positions and take a harder look at. And again, these are tied to I believe, the ESSER funding, social emotional learning, social worker, behavioral support.
They're not, actually, and we're going to get to that with Dr. Stevenson's presentation.
Gotcha.
Those are Those positions are not tied to the ESSER
Okay,
funds.
thank you. But we've not been able to fill them regardless, so it doesn't.
Correct.
Got it. So I would like
Either
to
way,
drill down on these a little bit and see how we can make ourselves more competitive. You know, how we incentivize those short of taking, you know, a broader look at compensation, a bonus structure, whatever it looks like. Because these are going to be important moving forward. So I just share that with you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments?
One more last one, insurance. We're new to this program. What's kind of the normal flow? How long does it take to settle out so you can get a real good idea, Mr. Bowen, of what the experience and costs and that kind of, does it take a year, 18 months?
Well, we get updates quarterly.
Okay.
So we just switched providers. We're now with.
So it's
Optimum.
early, it's really early.
January 1, so we're still early. We won't have the first quarter's data until well into June, maybe July. So when we made that change, it wasn't that we were saving on cost. It was a savings on the increase.
Okay.
We were comparing 3 different companies. All the costs were increasing. It just happened to be this one was increasing the least of the 3. So we still have some room to make up as far as covering, balancing our health and dental fund, and we're making some great strides in doing that. But I think it's going to be several years before we can really determine where we need to be and establish a positive balance in that fund.
Gotcha. As long
Without,
as that-
without supplementing from our operating fund.
Based on the experience level. Okay, all right, thank you. I appreciate that. I promise.
Nope. Anybody else? All right. So our next is for capital projects report. Dr. Shandor, do you have comments related to this?
I do, thank you. So now we're going to bring up Mr. Shearhart, and he is going to give you your this month's capital projects report. I'll turn it over to Mr. Shearhart.
All right, Chairwoman Geraltz, and members of the board, and Dr. Shandor, here's your capital project report for February. I can touch on 3 projects this evening. The first of these is Bruton High School. This is the Learning Commons and School of the Arts restroom renovations. This project is 99.9% complete. We just have a few tiny lighting control issues. The lighting engineer came in and tweaked on the controls there, and he's got most of it resolved, but there's just a few things left, and that's why it's 99.9. All the furniture and technology has been finally installed in the spaces, and the students are using all the spaces daily and enjoying them. And we are planning for an open house in the very near future. So you've seen this picture before, but without all the furniture and the technology in it. We've got the monitor on the wall finally that was stuck on a ship someplace, and the whiteboard and the podium there for whoever's giving the lessons there. So we've got that furniture in place and the technology in this room. And then this is the Learning Commons. You've seen this picture before, but now you see the curved seating here in the foreground on the left-hand side, which is what we were missing before. And then behind it, this is looking from the back of the Learning Commons. Again, you saw this picture before, but now it has all the furniture in it. So where the students can sit there at the 4 different tables there. They have power in the tables so they can plug in their laptops and their phones so they can do research and charge their devices while they're doing that research. The benches or the seating in the foreground here also has power in the front of the seats and also USB ports for their phones. So the next project I'd like to touch on is Bailey Field. This is a synthetic turf replacement there. This is a Greg Dolak project. He ran this one from the beginning to the end, and this one here is a picture of them.
Is that the final picture, Mark?
No,
or?
no, we're getting.
I'm just kidding.
So here they're cutting up the old turf here. They cut it up and then they roll it up in rolls to take it off the field. And then the next picture here, you see that all the old turf is removed. You can see the stone that is underneath the field. So the synthetic turf is actually sitting on gravel. And here they're putting down the new turf. And then it's here, most of the turf is all in place. They just haven't finished it off. And then this final picture here, this is what it looks like now, which is what it looked like on January 10th, with everything, the yard lines marked, and everything else is all 100% done. So it looks great. It's fantastic looking field now. Then the last project is Seaford Elementary School. This is a renovation and additions there. We had a pre-construction meeting with the contractor on February 3rd, and then on the purchase order and the notice to proceed were issued to the contractor on February 4th. They do plan to start the new classroom addition construction in March next month. In this new classroom addition, they plan for it to be done June of 2023. So just over a year it will take to build that. And part of that slowdown there, we typically would think it'd be done in about 10 months, but the supply chain things, we're kind of a little bit concerned about all that. So it's in June of 2023. And then we have a phased renovation of the existing building. The first phase will be done in August 2023, just before the beginning of school. And the second phase will be done in September of 2023. And that's just going to affect a few classrooms there in the second phase there. We are going to do some bus loop and vehicle parking lot expansions at the school, but those will not take place until the summer of 2023. So here's an overhead rendering of what the school will look like when it's completed. You see in the very top of the picture here, that's the new classroom addition there, and the new courtyard is going to have right there with a learning garden and also an outdoor classroom right there. Will be all enclosed in that courtyard. And then you can see down at the front of the picture, or the center of the picture just about, is the new entrance to the building. We're going to expand the library there and then also expand the main office area to give them a little bit more room in that space and another conference room. This is another view of that new entrance to the school, so it's going to be very updated. It needs it badly. It'll look great when it gets done. Okay. And so this is the last picture I have this evening, and this is looking down the hallway in the classroom addition. On the right-hand side, behind the blue walls, are classrooms, and on the left-hand side, you see open collaboration spaces there. They have the U-shaped tables there, the monitors on the wall. The windows are allowing light in. Those windows are all facing the courtyard, so very beautiful, very nice, very inviting for the students. And that's my last slide for this evening. Do you have any questions for me?
I have a couple. I will tell you, Friday night when I went to the Soul production, I went and looked through the windows at Learning Commons, and it looked great. It really did. It was awesome. Jimmy went also, and I sent him to check out the restrooms. I said, dude, you got to check out these restrooms.
Very nice.
The restrooms are really nice.
They are. I mean, if you knew what they looked like before, it is like night and day. And my last question is about Bailey Field. Is that the same turf, same type of turf and everything that's going to be at Bruton?
That I do not know. Again, that was a Greg Dolak project, and Bailey and Bruton Field is not mine as well.
Jim, I would imagine it'd be similar.
believe
I would imagine
It's
it'd
going
be
to be
similar.
similar?
Yes.
Okay,
Okay.
cool.
You'll go out and test drive it, aren't you? Careful.
Any mistakes that Greg made on that one, he can correct by the time Bruton comes.
Greg
There you
doesn't
go.
make mistakes.
That was a quick turnaround on Bailey because you figure you
Yeah. What
You
was
started
that,
it
month?
after football season, you'll have it done before soccer. I mean,
Yeah.
that is really, really
Yeah.
amazing. So kudos to that team because
It snowed. It
Yeah.
snowed in the middle
Oh,
of
that's
that, so
right,
they had to
it
clean
did.
the snow
Yeah.
off. It was amazing that
Yeah.
they got it done. They worked.
and just how excited I am for just the Seaford community and that school and just it's just going to be absolutely amazing. So very excited for that.
I know we've talked about it before, but how many additional classrooms are we adding there at
9
Seaford?
classrooms.
Okay.
So Bailey Field, I'll have to say I traveled that road quite a bit coming back and forth to the courthouse. And I saw them do that work. It was amazing seeing it daily just change. But I had no idea that it had been there 16 years. We got our money's worth out of that first one. But my question is, we've got a state-of-the-art stadium there for soccer, for football, for whatever. Did we ever fix the sound system?
Yes,
Okay.
it's fixed.
Good. And we haven't had any big events there to know that, because I know we had some issues with that, and
We
were
did.
working on that.
We did. It went, I want to say, when it went, or the speakers blew, or whatever that situation was right before the band expo.
The band
Right.
expo.
Yeah,
So
I had attended that, and
unfortunately,
it was
yes, wasn't good.
the sound wasn't the best.
No, that's putting it politely.
That was being
The sound
nice.
was not, yeah, it was not good. And that was a temporary, because
It was.
it would have either been that or have somebody, yelling out the window, so we
I
put something in
understand.
temporary. But no, Mr. Dolak has worked to improve the sound system over there.
Well,
yes.
thank you. I
Yep.
appreciate that hard work on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Yes,
Shearhart.
thank you, Mr. Chair. All right, next we have a policy discussion. Discussion of proposed changes to policy LEB, advanced and alternative courses for credit. Dr. Shandor, do you have comments relating to this policy discussion? Wait, wrong. They're all giving me the side. I got ahead of myself. That's okay. Next is for our ESSER 3 update. So I have Dr. Shandor to
I have comments about that.
Okay.
I just want to introduce Dr. Vika Stevenson. She is our grant coordinator who's done an amazing job in her role this year at organizing all of these things, researching them, and making sure that she works very closely with the folks, obviously, in the instruction department, but she works very closely with finance as well. So she's going to provide you an update this evening.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Dr. Shandor. This evening, I have the pleasure of providing an update on the York County School Division's American Rescue Plan, ESSER 3 plan. As I shared in August, the purpose of the ESSER 3 fund is to help safely reopen and sustain the safe operation of schools and address the impacts of COVID-19 on the nation's students by addressing students' academic, social, emotional, and mental health needs. Tonight, I will provide you an update on the implementation of the YCSD ESSER 3 plan. As per state guidelines, expenditures included in the ESSER 3 plan must adhere to the list of required and allowable uses of funds specified under Section 2001E of the ARC Act ESSER Fund. Adhering to these guidelines and considering stakeholder feedback, we have developed the 3-year ESSER 3 plan to include 3 main categories: addressing unfinished learning, other uses of funds as defined by the ESSER 3 guidelines, and prevention and mitigation strategies. As a reminder, these funds are awarded on a one-time basis and are to be fully expended by September 2024. In the updated ESSER 3 plan, we propose moving $400,000 from the prevention and mitigation strategies category to the other uses of funds category, and I will address the rationale for the reallocation of these funds in my next slide. Since we originally shared the ESSER 3 budget in August, the division has received an additional $2.5 million through the American Rescue Plan Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund to support HVAC projects. As such, it is no longer necessary to utilize ESSER 3 funds, and the $400,000 that we originally allocated to support the division's HVAC projects will be reallocated to the other uses of funds category to support the division technology, one-to-one technology program. So as I shared in August, the ESSER 3 plan includes additional positions to address areas of unfinished learning and provide needed support to specialized populations. We've currently filled the ACI coordinator, English language coach, and the letters trainer position. As you can see, we still have 3 positions to be filled, and we are continuing to plan for the implementation of these positions. As a reminder, these positions are supported with one-time grant funds. As part of our ESSER 3 plan to address unfinished learning, we are currently planning this year's Summer Academy. Like last year, the division anticipates having a robust K-12 Summer Academy experience for all of our students focused on addressing areas of unfinished learning. Not only are we planning to provide traditional intervention and remediation, both in person and online, we are also planning to provide a variety of enrichment camp opportunities for students in various content areas. Additionally, the division staff are planning a variety of summer family engagement activities to support students' academic success. Using a variety of data points, we will continue evaluating students' progress throughout the year to determine areas of unfinished learning, and we will continue to include strategies to address these in our Summer Academy plans. Following this board update, the revised ESSER 3 plan will be posted to the division website, and we will submit the amended budget to the VDOE and continue full implementation of the plan. As required, we will continue to conduct periodic review of the YCSD ESSER 3 plan and provide these updates to the board and community. Every 6 months, we'll review the Return to Safe in-person instruction and continuity of services plan, which is available on the division website as well. At this time, I am pleased to answer your questions related to the updates on the division's ESSER 3 plan.
Anybody?
Yeah, I have a question about the staffing update there for the positions to be filled, the speech language pathologist, the autism team coach, gifted services. I know you said these are like one-time funds to do this, so what are we doing with those positions after that money is spent? Are we absorbing it elsewhere or what?
Sure, I'll let Ms. Skinner address that question.
Yeah, I can answer some of that as well. So anytime you have one-time grant positions, let's say they're a year or two or whatever the situation is, it's important that we do a thorough review and analyze that position and what sort of occurred with that position, because you may find value in keeping that position. So really, it's a decision that you make towards the end based on data and based on information. But I'll let Dr.
No, I would absolutely agree with you. We will assess each of those positions that are added in and they're grant funded, and then look at the impact, if there still continues to be a need, and make a decision whether we would put that into the local budget that next school year.
So the people who are hired in that know that there's an expiration date
Correct.
on
Yes, there
that.
is.
So,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, we've done that in the past with grants, I know, from when I've been on the board. And typically, we've tried to, if we can't absorb those positions, if it was evaluated that we needed to keep them. But they do know ahead of time going in. That's what makes it difficult sometimes to.
It may impact
Yeah.
hiring, you're right.
It
That's
Yeah.
the challenge.
That's it for me.
You mentioned periodic reviews, so every 6 months?
Yes, so the VDOE requires that we review our ESSER 3 Safe Return to Learn plan that's posted on our division website every 6 months. So every 6 months, I'll come before you with an update on that. And if we need to make changes, then we will bring those to the board for review as well.
Gotcha. And Summer Academy, we're looking for that extended framework, that longer period?
Yes, we are.
Great.
We are already brainstorming ideas. We're gathering data. We're talking to the students who were in the summer program that did the enrichment. We're getting their thoughts around that. We're talking to teachers. We're looking at our student data, PALS data, and then also really looking at a family engagement component. The camps were very popular last year with our students. We're looking at how we can do more with those. So we are in the planning stages right now.
Expect increased enrollment, I suspect.
We
and
certainly want all students who we feel need to come, and then as many students want to come.
Roger,
But we're
the
looking for some creative ways to engage our families as well.
Yeah, from a recruiting standpoint, you bet.
Yes.
Great, yeah.
Well, the other things that you addressed in there was the unfinished learning, but we're doing just creative things in the actual school buildings for that too, whereas teachers are staying after, and we're not calling it tutoring, but I think we're calling it
Remediation.
remediation or
Yeah.
well, we're not calling that to the kids, we're calling it a club, I think.
Right, yes.
To make it more inviting, but we're paying teachers stipends to do that and stay
Oh,
after
absolutely.
with kids for that. Okay,
Absolutely.
so and all of that is allowed in those ESSER funds.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
And then the continuation of the e-tutoring and all that too. Yeah.
Yes. We're also looking at ways to bring in tutors during the school day. HR is working with us and looking at ways we can do that to help also during the school day.
And I think it's great having someone who's able to be dedicated and watching this stuff like a hawk too, because I know
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dr. Stevenson does a great job. Yes.
She loves her job.
In addition to all the other competitive grants, I know.
Yes.
Does anybody else have any questions?
No, thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you so
Dr.
much.
Stevenson.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Skinner.
I'm just going to stay up here. If that's okay.
Now we get to move on our discussion of policy changes, policy LEB, advanced and alternative courses for credit.
Correct.
And
If I
now
may, let me see if it's here. I believe they might have loaded it before the presentation. I apologize. I'm not sure.
I think it's a Word document.
Yep, there.
Thank you. Okay, let me see if I can make this a little bit larger for you. Ooh. Okay. Before you is our, well, let me first start by saying good evening. Before you have policy LEB. We're coming to you this evening as a discussion. It will come to you at the next board meeting for first reading and the final reading in March. And these are just a few changes, just 3 real small changes to this policy. The first, and really this is all about the dual enrollment. As you remember, we brought a lot of dual enrollment options to the program of studies and you approved those. So this just allows us to align our policy to that. So the first change you see there just allows us to partner with more than one community college. Because as you know, Shenandoah University is partnering with us for our teacher program, our teacher course, and Teach for Tomorrow course. The second change you see there really allows our students to have more dual enrollment options. Before it was really just centered around CTE. We're looking at adding English 12 and then the Teachers for Tomorrow. So it broadens our dual enrollment options for students. And then the last change you see there really just outlines and confirms. VDOE sent information about this earlier this year. Because when you take a college credit, you don't necessarily sit for 140 clock hours like you do for our courses, but they do equate a 3 college credit course to 144 student engagement hours. And so we just added that to our policy to show that piece. And that's it. Do you have any questions for me?
Straightforward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gill.
Would you like for me to exit out of this? Is that okay?
Yep. You can exit out.
All right, that was the last presentation on our work session agenda. I appreciate all you presenters who shared information this evening, and definitely recognize the work that is involved in all these. So this work session is adjourned, and I would like to call to order the February 14th, 2022 special meeting of the York County School Board. I've called a special meeting so that we can receive an operational update, legal update, and discuss and ask questions as a board. I know we've all had individual conversations between board members, but we all have requested an opportunity for an update so we can take action should we see fit. So I just want to clear that up, why the special meeting was called. I think we've asked for an operational update, so.
Thank you, Ms. Gerald. So this evening I have Dr. Carroll, obviously our Chief Operations Officer, who has provided these updates for almost 2 years.
50 years.
Forever.
Every 2 weeks.
So Dr. Carroll's going to provide you an update this evening. He has, of course, he has metrics in there. There's some other information he's going to share. We also have Ms. Barry here, our attorney, who is going to share recent litigation and some information as well for you guys to discuss this evening. So Dr. Carroll, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Shandor, Madam Chair, members of the board. So here is your report. Okay, so here we see the York County numbers further confirming that the Omicron wave peaked earlier than expected and continues to fall. In my last report, community transmission sat at 785.4 per 100,000, and the numbers have continued to fall every day except for one since, and now reaching 184.8 today. It's probably a good time to remind you of the thresholds. High community transmission is anything over 100, and we're at 184. Substantial is between 50 and 100. Moderate is between 10 and 49, and low is under 10. Now, these are always hard to see here, so I decided to give you a little bit of a close-up today, and that was so that you can see how better depict how the wave is coming down and the recent drop-off. In recent weeks, more and more experts are stating that we are close to entering an endemic phase of the disease. And as always, our positive cases roughly reflect the community. My last report, we had 49 active positive cases. Today we are at only 13. And as always, this is from the morning, so it's before we've added from the weekend, but we continue this downward trend. Likewise, our quarantines have fallen from 87 to 24 this week. One other interesting point here, to get a grasp of how intense the Omicron phase was, you see here that we have had a total of 2,841 positive cases since the beginning of the pandemic. Just over half of those were just last month. To give that even more scale, we've only had 116 cases through the first half of this month. So January was incredibly intense. I've shown this vaccination slide only once before, comparing our first dose vaccination rates with other divisions on the peninsula. Now, we have the second highest number here on this graph, but if you combine James City County with Williamsburg and you average that out, we do enjoy the highest vaccination rate on the peninsula for a school system. As far as vaccination and testing news, our eMed testing kits have now been replenished. We needed them in January, but we got them now. And in fact, we've received 2 shipments. And in addition to using them to help staff with diagnosing themselves if they think that they might be positive, we have now initiated a test and stay program for the staff that I've spoken to you in the past about. At this point, I'd like to hand it off to Melanie to talk about a legal update.
Good evening. Although current CDC guidance still does recommend universal masking for students in the K-12 schools, both the Virginia Supreme Court and the Arlington Circuit Court have provided language in their recent decisions that helps clarify that SB 1303 provides school boards discretion as to what CDC mitigation strategies are appropriate for their individual circumstances. There are also bills before the General Assembly as well as the governor that would remove the universal masking requirement for students in K-12 schools, which may take effect before the usual July 1 effective date. I believe at this point the board now has flexibility as to which mitigation strategies are appropriate going forward.
Okay. So we've always aligned closely to the VDH guidance, and it was always reasonably close to the CDC guidance. Since EO2 was issued, the VDH has revised their guidance for schools twice, and the new guidance has elements that deviate significantly from the CDC. Since then, we've engaged in communications with the Peninsula Health Department to discuss options for eventually transitioning out of this pandemic phase. Simply put, the local health department says we have latitude in the choices and order of adjustments we can make as long as we follow the VDH framework. Here you see most all of the mitigation layers that we have employed. Vaccination is, of course, the most effective layer. In regard to face coverings, it's important to once again note that this is not a standalone layer. That fact was the basis for the staff recommendation to begin this year using masks for staff and students. If masks were made optional, it would negate the K-12 exception for determining who was a close contact of a positive case. You remember that's the difference between within 3 feet and within 6 feet. So contact tracing distance requirements would double and possibly essentially double the number of students who were quarantined. As we know, January was a tough month. January alone, that may have increased our students missing days in school from over 1,600 to over 3,300. So the second, third, and fourth bullets on the left side of the screen actually are very much linked together. Now on the right side, you see staggering communal space use, using cohorts or pods with students, and limiting assemblies are group physical distancing practices, although they can be added or removed one at a time and have been utilized only where it was practicable to employ. So I just spoke of VDH revised guidance. These are the factors that they ask that you use as guiding your decision-making about prevention strategies and school operations. And they include consulting the public health to the department to understand local transmission and disease trends, and that's something I report to you at the top of this report every time I'm before you. Understanding the community level of vaccination coverage, that too is something that I report to you almost every report. Consider the level of impact to a school by identifying, monitoring, and reporting outbreaks to public health. And we've done even, I think, deeper dives in that. And when we talk about outbreaks outside of last month, we only had like 3 outbreaks in the entire fall. Also, understand community and school capacity and their needs, and that includes things like hospitalization, whereas in January the hospitals had reached the top of their capacity, but those have been falling steadily just as the community transmission has recently. And determine and implement a layered approach with multiple prevention strategies in consultation with the VDH and the local health department, and that's something we've always been in discussion with them. Been talking to them specifically about possible adjustments to that since the issuance of EO2. So, any start to reducing the layers of the mitigation will require us to lean into our strongest mitigation layers, and the first one of those is the vaccination rates that we see, where we are #1 on the peninsula. Secondly, our ventilation systems, and that was something that you started to see a lot more about recently. And we have always had all of our systems rated to the ASHRAE standards, and so that's been something I think that's helped us from having transmission in the schools. As I mentioned earlier, if we are to remove the mask mandate, or if that's a consideration, then those layers that are connected contact tracing, and quarantining should be considered also. But that would be 3 major layers, so it would make sense to delay any other retractions until after dropping below the high or substantial community transmission thresholds. And what may be surprising is after all of that, there's really not that many layers that are left to peel back. We would certainly look at when it's proper to scale back the frequent disinfection of high-touch surfaces, reducing those staggering of communal spaces and use of cohorts and pods, which of course affects distancing. Remove the limits on student assemblies and on field trips, which right now we've been approving on a case-by-case basis. And then the last ones would be removing limits on volunteer participation, visitors to the buildings, public assemblies, and then mask requirements on our visitors. 2 things that we can't make any adjustments to right now is removing isolations. If a student is positive, we would wait for ongoing, it would remain ongoing until we had guidance that remained or stated otherwise. And staying home when sick, because that's something that we've always done here, predated COVID-19. And one last thought, circling back to masks, any action that would be happening that affected students would not affect buses. Masks on public transit, which include those buses, are still under federal order. And masks for staff is dependent on the Department of Labor and the Virginia OSHA, their guidance. Now, what we do understand is there is a meeting of the Safety and Health Board this Wednesday on the 16th. And that is on the agenda to, I know the governor has made a request to talk about that, put it on that agenda, but we don't know what will happen at that meeting or any related timelines. But that concludes my report, and we're happy to take any questions you may have.
I have a question on that last point with the DOLE and the VOSHA. There are some other school divisions in Virginia that have it optional now for the staff for masking. So how are they getting past some of those requirements?
So I know Chesapeake and Virginia Beach both went optional, mask optional for students, and they followed the Department of Labor laws that require staff members to wear masks. There's another local division who went against their attorney's advice and made their decision on their own.
Okay.
So that's all I'm aware of, if anyone else has information.
Is there a penalty
I believe there is.
from OSHA? I thought there was, but.
Yeah, there may be, but they may also be anticipating that there's going to be a change.
During all this, I know one of the reasons that we wanted to wait is, just to wait for some of this guidance to come through. But I think we're watching the other divisions who went masks optional a few weeks ago, and we're not seeing a significant spike in those areas. And so I'm hoping that gives, everybody some, I guess, peace of mind. Reassurance that we wouldn't see a gigantic spike if we made that change.
I don't think where we're at in the wave, you could see a gigantic spike. I mean, it's just the nature of the disease, and it reflects the community. And so we're in such a free fall right now that you might see some stalling. You might see it level out a little bit at, on a certain day or two, but it's, this is moving very quickly now.
I know, I'm just checking the dashboards for those schools just to kind of see what the numbers were.
And if we were to make a change on the mask and say, instead of making immediate, that we made it like next week, for example, would that be enough time? Do we have N95 masks that we could put at the school for the teachers and students, just temporarily, not to give them all one, but those that can't get them until they can find some, it gives them at least a week to
Right.
find an N95.
Well, first of all, we have masks for staff. We put out about 1,000 masks to staff on February 2nd, and we have another, I think, 1,000 to 1,500 in reserve, and we have some N95s that are arriving this week. So for staff, we have those. Getting student N95 or KN95s is a little more difficult.
Right.
And also, those are a lot harder for students to wear. They're just harder to breathe in. So that's something I think really should be.
I'm just saying for those that want to continue
those,
to wear the
those
mask,
that
if we decided to make it optional.
I think we found a majority, I know in Virginia Beach, for instance, the majority of the students remain masked, at least in, earlier in the month in January for obvious reasons because we were at peak. But it's difficult to say how it will be in the county, but it may indeed be like that in the near term.
Yeah, we've heard that anecdotally
Yeah.
from a number of divisions.
And if we were to make a motion to do away from masks, what about for visitors and people that come into the schools?
Well, that would be one of the mitigation layers that we talk about as we pull those away. I think visitors and volunteers would be some of the last things that we would attend to, because those are people coming into the building that aren't regularly into the building. And so that's just something we'll have to think about, is how we lay those out. I just grouped them. We don't have a specific plan for how we would retract those mitigation
I
layers.
think we'd have to make specific mention of that.
Well, how many visitors are we having in the building right now? I know that's a very broad question. I'm thinking Read Across America Week.
Right.
Is on March 2nd.
Basketball games too, for athletic events.
So we're
they're all-
talking about that.
Which that season's almost
Yeah,
over,
yeah,
so
place.
you know a lot of.
Got about 2
spring
weeks
sports.
left in the
Yeah,
indoor.
yeah, and that
sports
winter.
coming up.
Well, during the school day, schools have been asked to only have visitors that have official business.
Right, and so I'm assuming it's not a flood like it used to be before this entire situation.
No.
And they're limiting volunteers, so they're not having as many
That's the other
volunteers as they
key piece.
normally would.
So when I listen to all of this, and I especially read through the VDH guidance, it's almost like it's falling more on family responsibility
Okay.
than the school division responsibility, when it's saying, if your child is not feeling well, if they've got a headache, if they've got any of these kinds of things, we need you to keep them home, make sure they're safe before you're sending them to school. Is that kind of the feeling that as we go into an endemic period, that's really what we're relying on?
Yes, the more you peel
family?
these back, then it does shift the burden more to the families.
Yeah, it's a not so subtle shift. I agree with you.
I think that's
Parent
a trend
family
we're seeing.
responsibility, perhaps testing before they come out, return to school and quarantine. I mean, we're not gonna mandate that, but those are things that, precautions that families can take. And as we all know, I have great confidence in our families and our parents in particular to support this, and particularly in the near term, we are still, in a high transmission dynamic. We are, some of my concerns that we've expressed in our sessions are, we're taking the meat of our mitigation layers, at least in my mind, with regard to masking, contact tracing, and quarantining, and removing those. So for instance, we pretty much from a data set standpoint have managed this by classroom, by wing, and inside the building. That data won't be available now due to, we won't contact trace. And I understand, I'm not even sure that this data is reasonable anymore anyways. That's another discussion. But, so yeah, it is a not so subtle shift. And I think what we have to do is do what we're doing now, is share with parents some of our concerns and some of our insights, but just as importantly, share with them too that it is shifting just from a screening standpoint, even testing standpoint, to the family. And that will, help us certainly in the near and midterm. And we know too, we're not going to eradicate it, right? Got to learn to adapt. And as this thing evolves, we evolve with it. And this is, part of that dynamic. One other quick note, our 5 to 11-year-old population, one vaccine, we're at under 30%. I think it's at about 26 to 27% with a full series. That's awfully low. I was glad to see the governor come out again today and reinforce that vaccines are obviously the safest approach. And, that's something that we can continue to press with our families. Because again, I think we can expect other variants, and we're not really prepared to be in front of those from a data standpoint. We'll have to wait for VDH, and by that time it'll be probably upon us. We know that the second Omicron variant is perhaps it's already moving, it's at least as transmissible. So this isn't the last time we're going to deal with some sort of variant.
And the reports I've seen on the Omicron variant, on the secondary
Yes.
variant, it's just that it would slow this.
Yeah, we might see a break in our step down where we
Plateau out.
Plateau out, not necessarily spike, but because we're again accounting for many people have had the virus recently in particular. So
I just,
Oh,
no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, but let's not lose sight of 13 active cases out of 12,000 students plus staff. And we're in free fall now. So I'm looking at, we're sitting pretty good, I think. Not to mention the fact that, you talk about cases and everything else. especially of the younger kids. But since the pandemic began 2 years ago, there have been only, and it's a lot, but when you're spreading it over 2 years, 770 deaths of kids from 0 to 17 in this country, of millions and millions and millions of kids. We had 770 deaths, the vast majority of which had underlying health conditions. I'd say now we were in as good a spot as we could ever hope to be at this time.
Let's say any death is tragic, whether it's
Exactly,
one or
exactly. That's
770.
what I said.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing I want to say is when we first talked about this in the summer of 2020, we talked about getting the most vulnerable learning-wise students back in the building as safely as we can, as soon as we can. And, you know, we worked towards doing that. I still want to keep our focus on the most vulnerable. We have the students and the teachers who may be immunocompromised and they might need that other layer of protection. So if there is a change, I think there needs to be some time, whether it's 1 day, 1 week, 2 weeks, whatever, for families to prepare and for teachers, staff, principals, schools, everyone to get resources that might be necessary so that we can be prepared when the change happens. So it's, you know, appropriate for the majority of people, so we can continue to keep everyone safe that's in the building too.
When we look at pacing or scheduling, is 7 days, 14 days, what's adequate, Dr. Shandor, in your mind, for introducing us to building leadership, ensuring that our vulnerable teachers and obviously children with special needs are adequate, are safe, and we have the appropriate precautions in place.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, the administrators in the buildings and all of us will adjust based on the decision that y'all make. I think a couple days would be helpful, so we can, you know, we can plan, so we can make sure. And sometimes it's just people need to absorb some information in a big change. But I would think that by Monday, you know, we have to work with communications. We have signage still at schools that we have to. There's some things that we have to do logistically to make sure, you know, put things in.
Yeah, we certainly don't want to rush you, but at the same time, what's reasonable should we?
I think, for me, reasonable would be Monday.
Okay.
I'm not saying that's your decision. I'm saying what I'm saying we could do.
Is Monday's a holiday, correct? The 21st?
Yeah, so it'd be the 22nd.
So it would be the 22nd would be the next day, which is the first day next week that students and staff are in the building.
You know, and one of the things that you brought up, Brett, was, you know, worrying about our most vulnerable. And a couple of the emails that I got from parents were, you know, my child does have a teacher who is immunocompromised, and so what we've discussed is if masks go away, but this teacher says, listen, I'm really worried, I've got a wife at home or whatever, that our children will respect what that teacher says. And I think that, I'm hoping, because I have a lot of faith in our community, is I think that's what we might see a lot of, is that, you know what, now I don't have to wear the mask all the time, but in a situation like that, I'm going to respect the wishes of my teacher or
I'll say I appreciate you saying that, because there are several teachers in our schools who have those concerns. And, you know, whether it's a family member, their child, their spouse, they have those concerns. And we certainly don't, you know, we want to make sure that we work with them. Dr. Vladu has worked very closely with all of our employees for the last 2 years who were in those situations. So we certainly want to be sensitive to that, because I couldn't imagine being a teacher in a high school and having so many situations in my personal life that I'm going to lose my career because of a change like this. We will certainly work with people. We'll work through everything and make every accommodation possible to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing we were saying like putting, you know, more of the onus on families to make these decisions. I think there also needs to be some talk of discussing sort of as a family that, you know, if it is a decision to mask or not, that is a personal or family decision, and that decision doesn't need to be discussed in the building. We don't need to put undue stress or pressure on someone whether to or not wear a mask when they're in there. So knowing that decisions might be different for other people based on, you know, different reasons, that we're respectful of those decisions as we go forward.
And I'll say in our school division, that's something that I think we should all be very proud of with our community. That typically does not happen in situations. We know there's isolated incidents where kids will say certain things. However, This isn't one of those cases, and I think all of the adults in the building are well-versed in how to intervene in those types of situations moving forward.
And I think most of the families in our division naturally give deference to anyone that has a need. And they will, they'll keep the mask on, or they'll do whatever that it takes to make someone feel comfortable. Because they don't want anyone to get hurt at all.
At the end of the day, we want all the kids to come to school and learn. Yes. Teachers want to love their kids. They want to work with their kids. Mask on, mask off. That sounded like wax on, wax off. But at the end of the day, our teachers want to work with our kids, continue to work with our kids regardless of whatever that situation is. Again, at times like this, you have to really look back to the last 2 years and think of everything that everyone has been through, not just a teacher, not just a child, not just a parent. We have military families, everyone comes to school, pulls up to the school with different things that you can't see every day.
Yeah.
So part of that is you have to fully understand whatever they went through last night or whatever the situation was with their family over the weekend, that this thing doesn't, that's not going to make a difference. We're going to keep working with kids because that's what we do.
So let me ask this question. I'm sorry to interrupt. This is sort of with this and sort of not. As we've done more and more this year, especially asking, if there's a concern or possibly holding a student home who might be feeling sick when normally they might have gone to school before. So we might have more student absences. Has there been looked at some of the letters that get sent home or something when a student is absent for a couple days? Because some of those letters can look pretty scary with the word truancy and things like that in there.
Yes, they have been looked at. We've unfortunately had some situations where that has happened. Our team has intervened, Dr. Butler, Ms. Parr, with our principals. Yeah, when you see the word truancy and you see Commonwealth Attorney and you see those things as a parent, that's an alarm, right? So yes, we've certainly got on the phone because sometimes communicating through these things and letters, you got to talk to somebody. You've got to get down to the situation so they fully understand what the situation is. So
speaking of that, I did have an email from a constituent, and there was an error in letter that went out, and it was immediately addressed. Okay. They were already addressing it when I called. They had already heard about it and fixed it. So.
And trust me, we're not happy when that happens.
No,
because nobody wants that to happen. Or our goal is not to increase anxiety for parents. That is not our goal. That is something that we certainly don't want to happen. We want them to send their kids to school and feel good about their child, and when they come home, have the conversation with them about how their day went. Hopefully they'll tell you some good stuff.
And we're taking that opportunity to relook at what we're doing for next year.
Okay.
So, Madam Chair, if there's no further discussion, I came prepared, depending on the discussion, with a draft policy change or motion. But if there's no further discussion, I'd like to make that motion unless y'all want to have any other discussion.
Go ahead.
So I would like to make a motion that the York County School Board remove the mask mandate and make mask optional for students when inside your YCSD facilities. And I would go ahead and change the date and make it effective instead of immediately, the 22nd. That's certainly reasonable. I know people have to prepare, plus, we don't want to turn around and our teachers get surprised because they didn't watch the school board meeting tonight and go, what's going on? That gives us enough time to do that, fix the signage, that sort of thing. So that's certainly reasonable. I'm good with that. And for employees under the current Department of Labor standards, that may hopefully change. Masks will continue to be required until such time as the Department of Labor rescinds or amends their mandate. I guess that's a good proper wording for that. And the responsibility for any further contact tracing be released to the local health department, which they had been doing all along. We just stepped in to help our own community and our own knowledge during this pandemic. Visitors and volunteers coming into our buildings will still be required to wear a mask at this time, and that can be lifted at a later date. And of course, masks will still have to be worn on buses because it's a federal mandate for public transportation. That's my motion.
I'm gonna read through it because I'll need a second, but I want to make sure I have it specifically. You made a motion that the York County School Board remove the mask mandate and make masks optional for students when inside YCSD facilities effective February 22nd, 2022. For employees under current Department of Labor standards, masks will continue to be required until such time as the Department of Labor rescinds or amends their mandate. The responsibility for any further contact tracing will release to the local health department. Visitors and volunteers coming to our buildings will still be required to wear a mask at this time. A mask is still required to be worn on public transportation, school buses, as per federal guidelines. Do I have that?
Yes, correct.
All right, so I need a second.
I will second that.
Okay, Ms. Ford?
Yes, the motion is made by Mr. Richardson and seconded by Mr. Schaefer to approve the motion as stated. Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mr. Richardson?
Yes.
Mr. Higginbotham?
Yes.
Mr. Myatt?
Yes.
And Ms. Geralds?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passed 5-0.
Ms. Peralta, I'd just like to, go ahead. I'll make my comment later.
Are you sure?
Yes.
All right. So
Well, I tell you, all I was going to say is I wear a mask now. I wouldn't typically wear a mask, but I wear it because I want to support our teachers. They have to wear one. So
Yes.
I'm going to wear one. That's the only reason I'm wearing one, to be honest with you. But I just wanted to say that I'm doing that for the support of our teachers that have to do it because of the Department of Labor standards that require that OSHA.
I think that was a decision we made as a board that we would do those in
That
advance.
is correct. Because I think we see some people in some different aspects not wearing them, but I do it to support our teachers. So.
All right, we're now in need of a closed session to discuss personnel matters. Could a board member please make a motion and a second to take us into closed session? Ms. Ford?
Yes, I move that the York County School Board convene in closed session to discuss personnel matters relating to a specific employee pursuant to personnel exemption at Section 2.2-3711A1 of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act.
I'll second that motion.
Ms. Ford?
Yes, the motion is made by Mr. Higginbotham and seconded by Mr. Richardson for the school board to convene in closed session. Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mr. Myatt?
Yes.
Mr. Richardson?
Yes.
Mr. Higginbotham?
Yes.
Ms. Geralds?
Yes.
The motion passed 5-0.
Thank you, Ms. Ford. Our next regular meeting will be held at 7 o'clock on Monday, February 28th, here at York Hall. We are now in closed
Can
session.
I add one item? I apologize to the board. I just want to make sure that we clarify. I'm not trying to rock the boat or anything. I just want to make sure we clarify that positive cases still need to be reported. So I just want to make sure I'm on the record saying
yes.
That's fine.
that positive cases still need to be reported.
Exactly. Yeah, to the health department. Yeah. Well,
And
Well,
that-
Schools.
Well, and to
Well,
they
to
should
the
tell the
schools.
schools.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm not trying to rock the boat, just we
No,
want to make sure we
Yeah.
could still make sure we're still reporting when we have a positive case.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, just for my clarification, because in my presentation, it said isolation still remains
Right.
until we hear otherwise. So
Right,
they
that
would
would be like-
be subject to an isolation. Quarantine is for close contacts, isolation is for positive
Right.
students.
right. My understanding of positive case, I'll be like when their doctor says they're no longer transmitting, then come back to school.
No,
To me,
no.
that's common sense.
You know, when they're diagnosed as a positive case, then there's a isolation period.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And their doctor
So
would say that.
in our communication with families and staff, can we make sure that that's very, very
We-
clear
we
on
will.
what the process is and who they should report that to?
Yeah.
We'll make it clear.
Yeah, there's no difference. An at-home test is a positive, as a PCR test from your doctor is a positive. So, I mean, you know, again, this responsibility of families to
Just want to make sure that's clear.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I just want to make sure that was.
Trust me, you'll get plenty of questions in the next week.
Thank you.
Have a great evening. Thank you.